This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
Is Jimmy Haslam a good owner now? That's a serious question. It's a serious question. Now, answering that question means having background on Jimmy Haslam. Answering that question means answering another question, right? So in order to even answer that question, is Jimmy Haslam a good owner? First, we need to ask this question. Well, what the hell is a good owner? What does that look like? What does a good owner do, right? Like, is that even a thing that exists, a good owner? Because sports owner is one of the most nebulous roles in all of sports. There is no one way that teams do things. There are teams that are super owner heavy, like the Dallas Cowboys. There are teams who you couldn't even tell me what their owner's name is, like whoever owns the Chargers. Who owns the Chargers? Like maybe the Spanos, right? Because they hate them in St. Louis. Who owns the Minnesota Vikings, right? Like that. Don't nobody know. Right? So that's why owner is such a nebulous role, because it's just the title of somebody who owns the team, but not everybody goes about owning the team in the exact same way, or even in a general template like teams have with general managers or head coaches, where they generally do a job. Owner is like, he bought the team. That's all the owner means. It's not really a role in the organization. It's not like the ownership means that they're the COO of the team. It just means they own the team. That can mean a number of different things for a number of different teams. So it's a hard role to pin down and say, this is what makes a good owner and this is what doesn't make a good owner. Because there's so many different ways it can be done. And honestly, there's so many different ways that it should be done that are known that can be messed up easily by people who don't know what they're doing. And I've said this before, ownership is usually the least qualified vote in any room when it comes to an NFL football decision, right? If you have a room of a head coach, two coordinators, a GM, his top assistant in ownership, that owner is probably the least experienced, least qualified person in that room. Like everybody else, much more experienced, much more qualified to make that decision. So again, owner is just this weird nebulous term. And when talking about Jimmy Haslam, you have to talk about the situation that Jimmy Haslam walked into, right? Because what gets talked about a lot is how Jimmy has handled owning the Browns. What has not been talked about a ton is how the team was owned before Jimmy Haslam, from 2000 to 2012, and the issues with how the Browns were owned. See, Alfred Lerner owned the team. He, I think, inherited the team from his dad. His dad originally was the one who owned the team with Art Modell. Art moves it to Baltimore, and then Al somehow ends up with the team in Cleveland. Now, there's always been this weird theory, not even weird, it's a pretty credible theory, that like Al was kind of okay with Art Modell doing what he did because he knew that would give him a team in Cleveland. But anyways, that's how the Lerner family ended up owning the team, and it was ran by his son after the eldest Lerner died. And the problem with Al Lerner, I believe it's Al Lerner Jr., Al Lerner II, that owned the team after his dad, was he was pretty indifferent and didn't really care about the team. Like, that was the issue. He didn't spend that much money on the team. He wasn't cheap, but he didn't spend a ton of money on the team. They weren't state of the art like the Browns are now. Like the Browns actually had like a staph infection crisis in like 2010. It wasn't great. It was genuinely apathetic. Ownership was. They would hire whoever the league suggested to them to run football operations. That would go predictably. They would fire that person and then hire a new person and everything. So we knew in Cleveland that just because the owner delegates doesn't make an owner good, which made us excited for Jimmy Haslam, right? Because Jimmy Haslam came in here dropping bags of money, right? We were like, oh my goodness, he cares about owning the team. He cares about owning the Cleveland Browns. He cares, and he's going to spend money. And that's why so many people were so excited for Jimmy Haslam in the early parts of him buying the team. Well, 2 years later, he had one of the worst reputations in the NFL. He was known as impatient, easily enamored, having coaches and GMs in these weird power structures that were destined to create power struggles. You like remember where he had Hugh Jackson reported directly to him, and then whoever was the GM would reportedly reported directly to Jimmy Haslam. Sorry about the mix up there. It's a lot of word jumble, but that created a bunch of chaos. During some point in that chaos, Jimmy Haslam hired DePodesta to kind of fix the structure. He didn't listen to him till about like 2020 when they hired Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. But now they've been doing that. They've been pretty stable. So what makes a owner good? Right? We went through that whole story because there's multiple ways to mess this up. Right? You can be the guy who doesn't spend that much money, who doesn't meddle, but just lets guys do their job. But you're constantly so indifferent about it that you don't even care who you hire. And you're just like, all right, well, he sounds good. He used to work for the Patriots. Let's bring him in. He gonna run the team. Okay, Phil Savage, that's fine. Okay, like you just didn't care. Dwight Clark, R.I.P., have him run the team. Like, that indifference was a problem. The inability to spend a ton of money was a problem. Jimmy spent a ton of money, but wanted a lot to do. That was a problem, right? And that was a problem that created more chaos than anything that the Lerner family did. But the result was pretty much the same. So what is a good owner? We've established there's multiple ways to mess this up. In general, I think a good owner is somebody who is invested, right? You want your owner to care. You want them to want the team to be good. You want them to be at the games. You want them to be invested. You want them to spend money, for sure. You want them to drop some money because you might have to do some things to roll around the cap. You want them to spend that money. You want them to be invested. But you also want them to allow other people to do their jobs, to hire executives and let their executives do their jobs. And their executives let their underlings do it. Everybody lets everybody do their job. And that is usually what we call a good owner. Who gets pointed out as the best ownership family in all of football, whether it's true or not? It's usually the Rooneys. Why are the Rooneys deemed to be the best ownership family in football? Well, they hired Chuck Noll in the 70s. Chuck Noll was really good at his job. And Chuck Noll turned the Steelers from a joke. They were an absolute joke before they hired Chuck Noll, a former Cleveland Brown. I would like to remind people in Pittsburgh. So just anytime a Pittsburgh Steelers fan brags about everything that they've accomplished, just let them know they would be nothing without former Cleveland Brown and Cleveland native Chuck Noll. Pittsburgh's never anything without the city of Cleveland. But nonetheless, Pittsburgh trolling aside, you want somebody who's invested, and the Rooney family is invested. They care, right? But they also know where their limitations are. You need an owner who is aware of the fact that they are the least qualified person in the room. Now, they have a vote, they have a say because they own the damn team. But they also have to appreciate that they're not the most qualified person in the room. Here's an example for those of us who might not be able to think about it from the perspective of being an NFL owner. Let's say we all started a restaurant. Let's say I started a restaurant, right? I saved up this money. I bought a restaurant. Now, I don't know how to cook. I don't have any specialties, but I want to own a restaurant because I think it'll be a good opportunity. I've always wanted to own a restaurant. I always want to say I own a restaurant, right? So I bought a restaurant, I own a restaurant, and I want to make Caribbean food. Now, me again, I don't know how to make Caribbean food. So when my chefs and are collaborating to make a menu, I probably don't need to be micromanaging that, right? When my chefs are trying to figure out what should be on the food and what ingredients to put on the food, I should probably let them do their job. Now, there's other things where I could have a say. Hey, how much do we want this experience to cost? Who do we want to market this experience to? Do we want this to be upscale? Do we want this to be just the regular takeout joint? Do we want it to be a mixed thing? Like those kind of decisions, yeah, ownership definitely makes those decisions. But when it comes to making the food, that's up to the cooks because I don't know shit about that. I ain't qualified in there. Now, again, if they're telling me that this is what they want to do, I want to hear the pitch and make sure it makes sense, that I'm not being scammed simply because I am being asked to pay for it. But I also have to keep in mind that, hey, this is their job. I hired them to do this job. At some point, I got to trust them to do their job. And I'm not the most qualified person to know what ingredients to get for a Caribbean restaurant. This is somebody who's done it before. So I'm going to trust them. Again, pay attention. I'm not going to, if I'm so indifferent about the restaurant that I don't even check in or check the books or see anything, and I'm just completely unaware of anything being done in the restaurant, that restaurant's probably going to stink. But if I'm aware enough to where, you know, the people who do their jobs, they check in with me and they tell me what they're doing, and I look over that and make sure that makes sense and check in with other experts to make sure that what's being said to me makes sense and all of that, and I'm doing my due diligence and I'm still letting my guys do their job, I'm probably going to have a good restaurant. The food's probably going to be good. It's not about telling your owner to shut up and not make any decisions. It's about getting your owner or having ownership be at a place to where their ego can accept the fact that when it comes to football ops, they're the least qualified person in every room that they sit in. And that while it's important to be invested in these decisions being made, while it's important to know what's going on, it's also important to not overstep where your experience might be helpful or might not. I am known for making YouTube videos. I am not going to go in there and tell a Caribbean chef how to make Caribbean food and think that I can do that because I was successful at making YouTube videos. The same way that Jimmy had to learn that just because he knew how to make truck stops nice didn't mean that he knew how to make a football team good. You see what I mean? Every time I bring up this topic, there's always somebody defending the owner saying, well, if I owned a team, I would want to make decisions too. And that's not a good mindset. Like if you own something and you want it to be successful and it's not your area of expertise, you should want to know why decisions are being made. You should want decisions to be explained to you. But ultimately, you hire people to make decisions because you don't think you're qualified to. And that's okay. That's how people make up for their gaps because no one person can do it all. Hell, in even running this YouTube video, or not YouTube video, this YouTube channel, there are things that I have to strongly consider offloading because I'm not great at them, right? I'm good at making videos. I'm good at talking about the Browns. I'm good at watching football. I'm good at analyzing football and discussing football. And sometimes I'm pretty good at marketing these videos and pushing them out. But I'm not the greatest networker in the world. I'm not the greatest person to step into a corporate office and talk about why my brand is a great collaboration idea for your brand and figure out what these ad deals should be and how much I should charge for a contract and how to invoice. All that stuff, man, I don't know nothing about that. That's stuff that I have to learn and strongly consider, letting people that I trust help me with because it's not something that I'm not the most qualified person in the room when that happens, or even close to qualified person in that room. So if I put myself in that situation, I'm putting myself in a situation to fail. The same way that should be a consideration is the same that my ego shouldn't trump that consideration is the same way you don't want an owner to be sitting in there and making all the decisions because they own the team, damn it. And it's my money. It's like, okay, but do you want it to be good? Because if you want it to be good, you got to collaborate. You got to let people do what they got to do. You got to let people do their jobs. And that is the difference in Jimmy Haslam. Because since 2020, he's let people do their jobs. He stepped out the way. He's still invested. He's still at every game. There's no doubt about that. He's at training camp all the time. Dude cares. He's still spending money. I mean, ask Deshaun Watson if Jimmy Haslam is willing to drop the bag. I'm pretty sure he would agree with you. Yes, he is willing to drop that bag. But he's also willing to let Andrew Berry make decisions. Okay, Andrew, you think this makes sense? You told me why it makes sense. I'm going to trust you on this. Okay, Kevin, you think that makes sense? Okay, I'm going to trust you on that, right? You're not seeing guys have a power struggle to get to Jimmy Haslam like it used to be. Remember that? Where guys were struggling to present stuff to Jimmy Haslam because Jimmy wanted too much control. Jimmy wanted to be in charge of the structure of the organization. He was not qualified for that. He had to learn that the hard way. But I don't judge people by the fact that they failed once. Everybody fails. I put out videos that flop all the time. You're not judged by your flops or your failures. You're not judged necessarily exclusively by your successes. I put out videos that have 500,000 views. I'm not judged by that. I'm not Quincy Carrier, viral video maker, right? You're judged by who you are every day and how you come back from your failures and how you come down from your successes, who you are, your consistency. And for the last 4 years, and look, I'm not somebody to give ownership a ton of credit. I have to give Jimmy Haslam the credit for doing what good owners do, which is putting his ego aside. Him and D Haslam have put their egos aside, let the people in charge make decisions, and are invested enough to still spend money on the team when asked to. It's a good ownership situation. Now, will it continue? We'll see. But hell, Jimmy's had plenty of opportunity to have that famous short temper and fire a bunch of guys. Like at the 2021, he could have fired everybody and it would have been justified to some. But he didn't. He could have did it at the 2022, 2023. So I feel confident saying I think he's grown out of it. I think he's understood what made Pittsburgh successful when he was a minority owner over there. I think he understands what he needs to be in order to be a successful owner. You know, there was a time where you felt like he was trying to be Jerry Jones. He's not anymore. He's not seeking the spotlight like he used to. He stays in the shadow, willing to spend money, still there invested, and willing to listen to his guys. And that's good ownership. Because remember, when Jimmy Haslam was making some of the worst decisions, these are decisions that we all thought were popular at the time. Hey, let's hire. You want to hire Freddie Kitchens, John Dorsey? That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I'm with that. The fans seem to like it. And not to say that the fans have bad opinions all the time, but there's a famous saying that has been around in sports forever. You start letting fans make decisions, you start sitting with fans. And Jimmy used to let the fans make decisions. Oh, okay, y'all want Johnny Manziel? I want him too. That wasn't a great decision, Jimmy. Right? But everybody else wanted him. Everybody else in the building said, don't do that. He wanted to do that. So you learn from your mistakes. You learn to move on. And you're not judged by your failures. You're judged by how you bounce back and who you are every day. And for the last 4 years, Jimmy Haslam has actually been what I would categorize as a good owner. Is it a low bar? Sure. But it's the bar we're talking about today. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have you a better night. Peace.